So let's,
Swear to God.
that is a giant bird.
Don't you poop.
So let's just,
I'll kind of let you lead the way into it, and we'll summarize it from there, I guess. And then you just work your little magic in there. Feeling like a freak on a leash.
I'm super excited and somewhat frightened to be here with Carrie from Villain Candle. So I'm gonna let her introduce herself, tell a little bit about her background, how she got started, inspiration, things like that. And then we're just gonna let this conversation guide itself, things about her branding, tips that she's learned as a new business. This series that I'm gonna be doing, it's gonna involve a lot of different businesses at different stages. So ones that have been in business for a while, ones that are getting started, ones that are launching soon. So with that being said, this is Carrie. Let her go ahead and take it from there.
Hey guys, my name is Carrie. I am the owner of Villain Candle Co. We are going to be launching in the fall, shooting towards October, Friday the 13th. My candles and our products are basically everything that has to do with the psyche of what is perspective of a villain. So that is why I wanted to bring Wade to some of Charleston's most haunted places. And right now we are in front of the Charleston City Jail, one of the most haunted places in Charleston, which we'll talk about later, I assume.
First met Carrie, I don't know, probably a year and a half ago, something like that.
I think so, yeah.
Somewhere in that range. And hey. So I first met Carrie a while back, and then I was headed out here for this conference and a lot of stops, and I guess reminded that you were out here, and so we thought this would be a great opportunity to take a look around, get a little bit of tour. And it was also perfect because of her brand, which is about history and haunt or villain, I guess, however you want to word that, kind of merging the two together. So as we go throughout this video, we'll get to learn a little bit more about her branding. She can tell the story, some of the inspiration, how she comes up with some of these ideas. And but yeah, we chose this as a good place to start, but you're going to see a bunch of cool other places that Carrie had pointed out that we're going to be stopping by. What got you first interested in making candles? I know, and maybe you should start with what your background first, because candles is a secondary thing. You're first all about villain and haunt and that whole vibe. So what got you interested from that into candles?
Great question. Yep. So I own a haunt. It is a large residential haunted attraction. I've been obsessed with all things hauntings, horrors, from the age of 5. So I also noticed that I have a closet full of candles, and I buy from a large company that has one large sale a year. And I was thinking, how would I put these two together? I love candles. I love my haunt. I love prepping for it year round. So I started researching and tried to make my first candle. It was awful, as you know, your first candles are not going to be great. But I wanted to introduce a candle from a different perspective. With all things horror or fiction, nonfiction, there's always a bias that you never get to see on film, or you don't get to see or read in a book that explains the psyche of what we think a villain is. And so I thought, what a great idea to start incorporating those stories into candles and room sprays and wax melts and things that I'm truly passionate about, but others can learn about at the same time. So it kind of became this perfect storm or perfect little marriage of the haunt and the candles. And now we're actually looking into being able to put those scents into fog machines for the haunt. So it's all going to start tying in together. So
yeah, in fact, I want to talk, and we'll do this maybe at our next stop, but I want to talk a little bit about the theme and niche, because I recently did a video on that, and this is a perfect example to encapsulate what I was talking about or trying to talk about in that video. But it's much easier to understand when there's a real life reference point of that. So I want to talk about that for sure. I've had the pleasure to get to sample some of what Carrie has done, and it's really good stuff. Not just the product, but it's the whole story, the whole feeling, the whole vibe, and that is how you develop a brand and how you develop something that's long-lasting. It's not just focus on product, but focus on the experience. We're going to head to another spot, and we're going to keep this story going.
See you soon.
Oh, it's already attached.
You're attached. I'm not. How did you attach me last time? Oh.
So let's talk a little bit more about the theme, the importance of picking one.
Yes.
and how it establishes everything else about your products going forward. Because it doesn't have to be just candles. Right. So that's the difference between a niche and a theme. Is a niche is the product type usually, whereas a theme kind of encapsulates everything together. So the haunt that you run, the candles, room sprays, anything that kind of jives together under one umbrella theme, villain candles, is what really makes that work. So if you want to elaborate a little bit more on your theme. And
obviously we're all in the candle industry, and you can divvy off from that as you grow to wax welts, room sprays, facial mists, all of those things. My theme is about a villain, but the villain in perspective. And I keep saying that because I don't want everything to be so matter of fact. They're all based off of some of my favorite horror films, fiction and nonfiction, documentaries, but all of these sense embody a persona, and what I wanted to do is capture that with a backstory and a candle, or whatever we're releasing, whether it be a room spray or wax melt. So basically, the way that I saw it from the start was having someone unbox this product but tell a story so you could understand it, and then when you start to use the product, the smells make sense. So my theme is, for example, edition number 78. There's a backstory to it, and it has a villain. You find out who the villain is at the end. Some of these villains are explained and you know exactly who it is, and some are based off of fictional characters, and they tell a story that you can relate to. When the candle goes through its burn life, you're smelling what I just explained. So for 78, that is when one of my favorite movies of all time came out. As you could probably Google that and figure out which one that is. It's right here. And it's
one of my son's favorites.
Yes, it smells very earthy. Like if you were watching the movie and you went and you were standing in the streets, what you would smell on that fall day. It's not sweet, it's very grounded, but there's a little ominous scent in there that's something that's not, you wouldn't expect with that time of year, but it mixes things up. And that, in that story, gives you perspective as to why that villain is the way that he or she is. So that's kind of what I based it off of. And that way, when you are getting your candle or whatever you purchase, you're walking yourself through the story and you understand it. So every edition has a story and you can collect them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's also important to talk about whenever you have a strong theme that you want, it's all about the experience, that you really need to focus a lot on presentation.
Yes.
And packaging. So I know, as she mentioned earlier, Carrie mentioned earlier, her launch is coming later this fall. So she's still doing some product development, some packaging work. And but if you want to, I guess, maybe go into a little detail, if you want, about what you're trying to accomplish with your packaging, because it's gorgeous in a scary way. No, it's really, we'll leave some links and information you can check out. I think part of her site that is public at the moment, so you can read a little bit more about her theme and brand. But again, she's actually launching later in the fall. But the presentation, the packaging, everything down from her logo, the colors, the type of materials, not just boxes or tubes or business cards, it's the type of materials being used, the graphic design. It really personifies the entire brand.
I actually struggled with how I would like to launch, and I have a vision that I want to present something to the customer. I don't want to just throw something out there to get started. So my packaging has been in development for about a year now, because we're trying to get something unique but embodies the story, because I don't want people to jump straight to the product. So I based my packaging off of structure and cost of goods, which is important, but we also want to stay on the higher end and luxurious side. So everything is suede. There are velvet bags, gold foil, but when you open the tube, our main candle is in a tube. When you open it, there's a QR code on the inside, which is important because I want you to scan that code to take you to the website to show you why your candle is called the edition it is. And I think that by giving you more in packaging that you can hold on to, you want to hold on to the tube as a pencil holder, or you have this nice velvet sack that you can put change in or whatever. It's giving you more, it's giving your customer more, and they're going to remember that story. but also this package, all of those items hold that smell in really nicely.
Yeah.
So when you open it and you've already understood what your addition's about, you're already excited about what you're smelling.
And none of it, someone's going to want to throw away.
Yes.
Like with the samples that I was, checking out of yours, it's nothing that you're just going to toss. You want to keep it, especially with the theme like this. A lot of it's collector items. So a lot of people want to keep these packaging materials, whether they're tubes or bags, and use them, repurpose them for other purposes. Yeah, it's gorgeous packaging. You guys are going to be blown away whenever it launches.
Let's see.
Oop, stood under the tree.
I had to turn myself off.
Okay, what were we just talking about? With your design of your products, what did you start with and why?
I knew what I wanted it to look like. I knew my colors and all of that. So from there, I had to decide what jar or vessel I was going to use. I started there, and then from there, I tested waxes to fit what I wanted. That's just my way of doing things, and I think that the benefit can go either way. You can start with the wax or the vessel, but to me, if you already know what you want your product to look like, to feel like, you start with what you're going to put your product in because you've decided on it. And there's so many different choices of wax that from there you can test to see what fits that vessel. And then went from wood wicks to cotton wicks, and how I wanted it to perform was based off of the vessel. So that's the way I decided to start business-wise, versus I think some people just want to start with the wax, but they're not sure what you're putting your wax in. So I started with the brand first. I use Cocoa 83.
Okay.
I tested a lot. Just love the smooth tops, the creamy white of the Cocoa 83. I wanted a clean, crisp white against a black background. So that's what I decided on, and I made it perform with the vessel that I had.
And how much time would you say you've spent, I guess, wick testing? Like, what did you say, how did you go about that?
Well, I started with wooden wick. Wooden wicks are so unpredictable, and I spent a lot of money on testing them. I just decided to scrap it and go with something that I knew was going to be consistent, and so I went to cotton wicks. I'm actually in the Premier series, and I've narrowed it down. I want it to be very close to perfect before I put a combustible item in someone else's house. Yep. So I test as if I'm not trimming it. I test as if it's a power burn, and I'm still thoroughly doing that. With a watchful eye, because not everyone knows to trim the wicks. Even if you give them a candle care card,
right,
they're not going to trim their wicks.
Right.
So that's how I decided to test. And then I said I wanted something unique as well. And we will come out with a larger vessel that will use multiple wooden wicks, but I didn't want to waste my time on that right now.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple, keep it clean. And with the Premier wicks, I just find there's so many sizes in the 5x5 increment that puts you where you want to be. And I've found that those sizes are actually accurately working with the other scents or fragrances that we're using.
Yeah, it's one of the major benefits of that wick series, and why I talk about it so much, and not to rehash it, but those sizes let you really dial in as specific as you can.
Yes.
I mean, it's as close as you're going to get to perfect, having that kind of flexibility on sizing. Mm-hmm. So that guy just backed into that flower pot.
Oh, hit and run. Welcome to Charleston.
Regarding testing and product development, it can get expensive. You touched on that, especially if you start with products that don't work and you end up changing your mind. It can get really expensive. So I guess what would be a good lesson for you to people starting out that are apprehensive, I guess, about investing too much, or that afraid to spend the money or the time to invest in product development, and why it's so important? And if someone doesn't have a lot of capital, any tips as a new business starting soon that you would offer those new businesses?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, ask yourself why. Is this a passion? Are you just doing this as a side hustle? That's going to gauge how much you're going to put into this, because if it truly is your passion, something you want to do long term, then you're going to have to put the money up, but you're going to have a starting point. Capital, I'm still solo, so I do work a 9-to-5, if you will, and I use everything that I can with my income to use capital for testing, because it is expensive, but you have to put money in to get money back. And
or to be much slower at the very least.
correct.
If you don't. And that's a huge lesson that I think most people are on this channel, for example, are aware of. Is it's not something you want to just dive right in without a plan, and you don't want to just ditch your normal job and just go full bore into this, because it takes time, and having another job to help fund that passion and build that. Not only is it going to make it more possible, but it can make it happen sooner. And so I'm a big advocate on starting it on the side, developing it while you keep your stability in your job, and then down the road, then you can make the decision later if you want to go all in.
Also, it's okay to take a break. It's okay to take a break from making for a week, or you can do small goals there throughout the week. Sometimes I don't get home till like 8 p.m. from my day job, and it creates a really long day, but I know that I'm gonna come home, and if I'm have a late night, I'm gonna spend 30 minutes on something, whether it's part of your business plan, or I need to buy more wicks, or I need to do something. I just keep a list of things that keep me in balance without becoming all overwhelmed.
But you've got that huge advantage of your passion for what your brand is about. And that's why I know we keep saying it over and over in this video, but that's why it's so important. One of the reasons it's so important to pick a theme and a niche that you care about. It's so much easier to put in the effort because you really care about it. It's interesting to you. It's not just, well, it's just a candle that smells like X and I want to sell it for Y. It's building something, an identity for yourself that you just really care about. Not to mention, it's much easier to sell a product with a theme and a niche behind it and a brand behind it. So
if you want to, over there in that big area by the battery, where we went last night, and then we can go to the battery carriage house.
Let's go ahead and head to the next space.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, we are having the best
we're enjoying
time.
it. Yeah.
We love watching them.
This will work, right?
Okay.
All right, now I don't remember what the hell we're talking about.
Me either.
All right, so now if you can give us a few, or talk about a little bit about your marketing strategy for how you plan to market your brand and your theme and your whole concept, because you want to tell a story, right? So what are some of your marketing strategies you're planning on or have already started?
So the strategy behind, I guess, the release of the product is getting you involved in the backstory, giving you just snippets so that you want more. I don't want to put everything out there before you even get the product. So it kind of goes alongside with the packaging. You get a little bit more with the packaging that's consistent with the story, but to initiate the story, to grab your attention, everything is on the more ominous side, the more spooky
kind of get
side.
teased along.
You get a little, like little teasers, almost like you're watching your favorite show and next episode. So for me, I'm just gonna stay true to myself, my target audience, and get you excited about the next launch. It's very themed to horror and serial killers throughout history and the human brain behind it. So
stuff that no one wants to admit they really love, but they do, because those are the shows that on Netflix do the best. People binge that stuff because everyone's really, really curious about that mindset and just everything about it. So actually, speaking of that, so far you focus mostly on historical references. Do you have any plans or desires to try to time new releases with like future films that come out and try to kind of time that?
Yes. There are things that will be very matter of fact, just like we're launching on Friday the 13th in October, which only makes sense, but there are certain remakes of original films that are coming out in the future, even into 2024, that we're already kind of planning for. And how do I do that to compare it to the original and mix those fragrance oils together? I don't want it to be something that I just pull off the shelf. So I try to think of what story that director is going to try and tell, or I compare the original versus the newer that's coming out and blend it something more modern that people can relate to without giving too much away. In 2024 there is something big coming up, so that's kind of my, I guess, marketing and strategy behind it, and to get you excited. But for me, the backstory is the most important. I really want that story to come through in the candle. I'm never going to do anything like we're going to the beach. It's just
Sure.
never going to happen. It's about 10 to 12 notes in there that throughout the burn are going to give you that storyline.
While you haven't officially launched your website, you have been selling still locally, right?
Yes.
So has there been a memorable moment for you so far?
Memorable, I would say what I thought would sell out locally didn't, and the ones that I didn't think would did. So it actually pushed me into my own controlled focus groups. Right now it's just with friends or family, because I think just like everyone, and even yourself, you go and you think you're gonna make a candle, you buy the kit or wherever you go, and you realize there's so much more to it.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a learning curve, but I guess the most important thing for me so far has been to listen to other people.
Yeah.
While we will stay true to our brand and everything's got a strong earthy scent, it's never going to be fruity. That's just never where we're going to go for it. But the feedback from others has made a huge impact in designing of packaging and designing of labels and second use of packaging. Is it important that it's recyclable? Things like that have made a lasting impact and actually have changed my business plan along the way.
Actually, that's what I was going to ask you next was, have you noticed at any point you've had to pivot? And it sounds like you already have, and I was going to suggest that's being willing to do that, to adapt and pivot based off feedback and change your direction a little bit is really important, because it's very easy to get stuck in your ways. This is what I want to do, which is important. You need the passion, but you got to have some flexibility.
Yep.
Because if you want your passion to take off, you got to be willing to listen to the people you're trying to push your passion to.
These people have great ideas. Like your customers that are your friends and family, of course you're going to get biased opinions from those individuals, but do not discount them, because you do want every comment back that you can get. If it comes from a stranger, or hey, have you thought about doing this? And then they have a really good point. That's a huge pivot, because it comes from someone who's unbiased. They haven't seen or held anything just yet. They just know the idea. And that's why I decided to release last year certain editions, not fully packaged, because these people are local to me, but also networking and snacking, and you're putting trust and getting that feedback immediately at these
receptive to ideas.
Absolutely.
I mean, none of you guys watching this will know this, but like, how many ideas have we been kicking around in the past day during our conversations? It's like we've developed like 3 business plans in the past few hours. Probably a 20-minute conversation with someone is probably more productive than 2 hours of sitting down and working on something by yourself. In my opinion, it gets the gears turning. It gives you ideas, things, a different perspective, and that's really, really important. So let's.
Swear to
That
God.
is a giant bird.
Don't you poop.
So let's just. So, we flip spots. Another important thing for new candle makers is to be thinking down the road, thinking ahead, and it entirely depends on your goals. Do you want to stay as a side, a little side business, a small business? Do you want to grow your candle business over time? What do you want it to develop into? So those goals are going to vary for everyone, but if growing and scaling your business long-term is among your goals, that's an important thing to talk about. So if you want to talk a little bit about what you thought in terms of scaling when you got started.
Yeah, so when I'm new to business plans, I had to educate myself, all of this from the start, and I kind of took a business approach before the testing approach. I knew that how much passion and time and money that you're putting into it, how am I going to scale this to not mess with the cost of goods, to not mess with things that you've already kind of lined up to get your price point. And so I racked my brain for, I know we're still doing it it's ever changing, but for the first year, how could I scale this if something just popped off or something was super successful? So you're not, people want it now. And if you can't have it on the shelves, you can't have it on your site now because of a scaling issue or it's selling out too much, how to do that. And so that's something that kind of goes alongside our packaging. Is I figured out what kind of packaging would work to scale in the masses and not affect my margins. So I started with that, and that kind of helped take the design process down from material and just turned into more of the fun part, the graphic design. And I knew that I just don't have a lot of hours in the day, and I'm not as skilled as graphic design artists and things like that. I had to pick some individuals to help me. I had to pay for that up front. It's a great song.
It's a great car.
Great song. Yeah, I love the rims, the
bright
lift.
lime green. That's cool.
Anyway, back to that. yeah, just scaling it and how to figure out how to do that seamlessly, and even how to build it even more. When you release something else, say you want to release a room spray, how do you put that packaging without affecting your bottom line? I'd already crunched those numbers and reached out to those suppliers well ahead of time, so I know what my base starting point is. I think that's a very important thing that a lot of people miss from the start.
Yeah, again, that's why it depends on your goals, because doing that approach is a great approach to set you up for longevity, but it does require more upfront work, more upfront capital, because you're spending that time to try to get it right from the get-go so that it's easier in the future. Now, you can go the other direction. If you don't have as much time, as much capital, you can start with what makes sense for you now, but you just kind of have to know that as you grow and scale, you're going to have challenges to deal with later.
Yeah.
So it can work either way. You just got to think of what makes the most sense for you. All right.
There's not really one way to do everything.
Yes.
Like it's okay to work and it's okay to feel overwhelmed. Those are okay.
So what advice would you give to someone that's also just starting out, not really sure where to go to learn things, what direction to take? Just, I guess, tips for any new candle maker, someone that wants to start a candle business.
Do your research. There are more channels now, with Wade's being a very informative channel, to dive into the hows, and you already know your why. Hopefully you've found your why, but get an idea of what it's going to take legally. Look into also a CPA or things that are going to be expenses that you're going to want to track along the way. I wanted to grasp from the beginning, okay, let's learn from the basics. I've learned that, yeah, I do love the process, but I also wanted to make sure I'm researching the business side of things, because those things are important, and I am not the best person to give advice like a CPA. I would hire that, and so I already knew the expenses I was going to take, so I saved my money to do that. The website, capital, I still work on, because materials and costs are ever changing, as we all know. Those items I wanted to have a good idea about before I got too far in and realized, okay, I'm just doggy paddling. I can't do it with my full-time job. And the whole goal is to get out of your full-time job to do what you love, if that is your goal. So that would be my advice to start, is really think about the other side of, I just want to make a candle.
That highlights something that we touched on earlier, that it just completely depends on the type of person you are and your goals, because I'm the same way as Carrie. I like to plan as much as I can in advance. Now that can cause you to delay opening longer, that can cause you to be more overwhelmed up front, but to make your job easier later. It just depends on how you like to work, because there are people that take a different approach. There's a lot of people that want to hit the ground running and start getting some testing, some processes. They want to start with a minimum viable product, and they just develop and learn and improve things over time, and they worry about the other things as they come up. And if that's how you work, that's totally fine. There's no right or wrong way to do it. I prefer the same. I want to have a better grasp on the bigger picture for me when I get started, because it helps me, the way I think, to plan stuff further down the road. It'll vary for everyone.
And it's okay to do it whichever way. It just depends on your personality and, again, your end goal. If this is just a side hustle, you're just doing it for family and friends, and it's not as much into detail.
It just depends on your goals, and yours is such a heavy theme-focused brand that everything has to be consistent with the theme. So one tip that I've always given people starting out is, if I was to start a business from scratch, a candle business, I would start with some product development, make sure A, I like doing it, B, learn the basics. I need to be able to make an adequate product. You can always have time to improve it, but at least make an adequate product. Get those fundamentals out of the way. And then the bulk next step that should take a significant amount of time is about theme and branding and building your vision. And then once you've dialed that in, then you can get back to some more product development. That's the approach I like, but it depends. Honestly, if you can find someone else, like we're doing here, to bounce ideas off and just have conversations with, especially if it's someone already involved with you, like you have a partner for your company, but even if you don't, I mean, we talked about it earlier, you can have conversations and sit down and you can learn so much and get so many ideas from a small conversation than sitting by yourself and trying to do it all by yourself.
Well, after my fail, all of us should be failing. If you're not failing, you're not winning.
One of the best sayings ever is to fail fast. That's why I like to do a lot early on, because if I'm going to fail, I want to know it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Because it's faster for me to improve and get on to good results. Try things. If it doesn't work, that's new information. That's good.
Yeah, and learn from it. It's okay to like take an idea that you thought was wild, and maybe it just didn't work out, but you knew it, you went there, and now you can move forward. I try to utilize everybody else's strengths, because there's so many smart people out there that can apply what you're doing. Just know that there's education all around you, and sometimes your local like colleges, ever since COVID, they're doing like free classes for certain things. That's where I learned to weld, is going to those courses. So it's things like that I try to harness. And please don't go to TikTok and do these fads, because they're not. Please test them first. Yeah. But look for the facts.
Most of them are to get views.
Yeah. Just if you hear a fact, what you think is a fact, go and try to research it. And then if that person is consistently coming up with factual answers, trust that guide. Yeah. So that's kind of where I go to. Cool. The internet, what we all have. And then some of these supplier sites, they have little, learn your candle math, don't plug it in, please, because you're gonna wanna.
I 100% agree with that. It's a good tool to have, and I know that in a pinch, people are always asking, is there a quick calculator? And people share them, and that's great to help each other out, and it's nice that those exist. But if you can learn to do it yourself, the math yourself, you don't need to rely on a tool to do it, but you become a better candle maker by knowing how your product works and how you made it. And then if you have to adjust, you know what to adjust and how to adjust it. You don't have to go back to a calculator. Yeah. I 100% agree with that. But that's just how I go. That's how I approach things personally. If I get invested in something, I want to learn how it works, why it works, and learn to do it myself. So yeah, I would encourage, if you're brand new and you're needing to use the calculators to get started, that's fine. But I have an entire video on this channel that I broke down processes to help others learn how to do it themselves. So I would encourage checking that one out. But yeah, I agree with you on that. Yeah. Learn how to do everything about your product if you can.
If you can basically go into a conference room and all you have is a whiteboard and a marker or a pen and a paper, and you can preach to the choir, break down your candle math, how it's made, you're trusted. Like, you're very knowledgeable about your brand, versus you can go and plug in the numbers, which it's great in a pinch, but then I know I'm more inclined to then go and check the answer, like an algebra equation.
I never trust it.
Just learn it. Yep. Because you want to be able to sit down with someone and write it down, like, no, that's how you do it.
Learn your process in and out. It also makes you look, and you said it, so much more credible about your product. One of the best things that helps me, I always do well at live shows, and one of the reasons is I get asked about the products, and I can talk about the products as so informed about my own products and how they're made, and the notes that are in them, every little thing about it. And your customers sense that. They know that you're passionate, informed, that you were involved. There's a common phrase or saying out there, you need to know 5 times more about a topic than what you're going to speak about. And the point of that is it's easy to always know what to talk about on a basic level, but when people start asking you more advanced questions and want more details, you need to be ready to answer those questions. Yep. And the more you know about your product, the better. That was a really terrible way of saying. Getting to the point, but hope.
I got it.
Yeah.
You went around our elbow, but it's fine.
It was interesting. Okay. It's late. We've been doing this all day.
So. It's been fun though. Yeah. We've been to a bunch of Charleston's most haunted historical sites, which we'll put some facts up.
Yeah, you've seen some of the footage of the different places we were sitting to do these recordings, which is a lot of fun, because all of these places we went were new to me. Getting to hear more about Carrie and her business and backstory and all of that. It's super interesting. Like I wish you guys watching this could get as much information as I've gotten about her theme and her niche and everything. It's super interesting, super talented. So I have no doubts how well this is going to do based off everything I've seen and samples and everything. So anything else I guess we want to cover?
Don't be afraid to put yourself out there, ask questions, and learn more. You're always going to be learning.
I would say not just not be afraid of it, I would encourage it.
Yeah.
The more you can be different, the more you can try new things, the more you can try to stand out and put yourself out there. That's how people make it in any kind of industry. But in a business like this, there's a lot of candle companies. Find a way to stand out.
Yep.
It's it can be game changing for you, and that's why I'm so confident with what I've seen and everything that Carrie's doing, and why I really want to do this, because there's so much work behind it and so much passion, and it's so well done, and you guys will see what I'm talking about.
It's almost halfway to Halloween too, so this was like the perfect time to show him around Charleston haunts, and I'm gonna get him on a ghost tour and all that fun stuff too. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell you the story of my brand and where I'm going with it, and for really listening to it.
No,
I had the best time.
Yeah, thanks again. It was
Thank
awesome.
you.